Thank you so much, Pavel, and thank you all for joining. Like Pavel mentioned, today we're going to be talking about legacy systems and how to make them sort of part of your modern tech stack, specifically around CloverDX and some of the things that we can help you guys do. Like you said, feel free to put any questions in the Q&A as they come up, and we'll get to them at the end. With that, let's start. So first, I want to quickly review the concept of data migrations, right? Data migrations are the process of taking data from an original source system and pushing it to a new target system. Now, this is usually a pretty complex process. It's easier said than done. It can take weeks, months, or even years to complete. And sort of a tricky nuance of them usually is that they're usually done in parallel to target system implementation. So think of something like having a traditional like CRM system, right? At some point, you're going to want to, maybe move to one of the new players. Think of something like HubSpot or Salesforce. And a lot of companies sort of gone through the process of trying to both start a new implementation of maybe a cloud-based system or a modern sort of tech stack or modern application. But in the meantime, they also need to sort of keep that old legacy system up and running until we have a full migration done, right? Again, this requires both domain knowledge of the source and the target, which is a bit tricky, especially when you get into mapping, which we'll sort of go over a bit later in the webinar. But just sort of to set the stage, this is sort of what we're talking about in context. The ability to get something from an old system that's maybe outdated or outrun into something that's a bit more new and useful for you guys. And it usually looks something like this. Think of a legacy system that has something that has not been modernized for a long time, maybe runs on an outdated platform on-prem, usually in-house or heavily customized. We typically see this a lot of custom applications, think, early 2000s, trying to get that data out into something that's sort of the new gold standard, right? It usually holds business critical information, things that sort of our businesses rely on and have relied on for many years. Think CRM, ERP, billing, things that are at the end of the day, sort of mission necessary for anything that we want to do in our business as well. So again, required for correct functioning of organization. And the idea is that we want to migrate to something that's a modern, more capable system. They're often cloud-based or sort of the new gold standards, sort of a new generation of applications that allow us a bit more flexibility and more sort of have sort of been developed with more analysis and BI sort of standards in mind. They provide business benefit, like sort of better reporting, data quality, visibility, and the accessibility across your entire team. So there's a couple of different webinars there that we've done in the past. Like Bill said, this was one in the series. But just to set the stage there, that's really what we're talking about. The idea here is that every situation and system is unique. We're going to start by evaluating how data gets out of your system currently, right? In a lot of ways, modern sort of data modernization techniques and sort of, I would say, projects can be incredibly complex from that point of view, right? If you have more than one, you may want to look at the sort of the cost or the man hours for your current process and what that looks like, and sort of weighing out the benefits of that. Another thing to think about is what will it take to integrate data into your modern data pipelines, right? So often we have things sitting there that maybe hasn't been used for a while, or sort of a backup in case X, Y, and Z happens. So we sort of want to take a look at each one of our systems and how all those systems are unique before we sort of come up with a cohesive strategy for how to tackle these different things, right? So now I'm going to talk about sort of the integration approaches and sort of as you're developing that strategy, as you're going through this sort of journey from the legacy system to a more modern system, different ways that we can connect to these different sort of systems and ways to get data into and out of them. So first one is sort of old school, sort of traditional approach is connecting via file extracts. So a lot of these legacy applications allow importing and exporting of data, right? So the idea is we can get these data exports, and sort of manually pipe them into our modern data pipelines. However, they're often very limited and require sort of manual intervention, right? So think of someone sitting there and clicking through and saying, hey, let me get the monthly exports for the last 24 months or the last 5 years, right? Automating that can be pretty hard and somewhat challenging, especially if you don't have something like a command line sort of interface or the ability to schedule the import and export of data, right? So the idea here is we're trying to sort of take a manual process, try to automate it as much as we can, given the limitations of that sort of legacy system. And another thing to sort of think about is data formats that can be challenging, right? These sort of file extracts are often designed, not really the idea of migrating away from that system, but more of like human consumption in pretty reports, but often are sort of, don't have the data quality integrity that we'd want to actually process this data by machine to then send to a completely different system, which maybe has a completely different data format, right? So think of things that are tricky like dates, sort of that legacy system. We'll have those file extracts, and you can use an ETL tool, sort of like Clover, to pipe it over into everything else. But just sort of, in our experience, some of the contingencies and issues that come up with that approach that would need to sort of be considered and rectified based on what you're using, right? That sort of leads us to a more, powerful traditional approach, or something that's often the road most traveled by, is that many legacy apps are powered by sort of databases in the backend, right? So we have run some sort of, think of like an Oracle, MySQL, or Postgres DB on some machine somewhere, and that's sort of the backend DB of our legacy system, right? It'll store all data, but often implements part of, sort of business logic as we're building through these data sets, right? So this is like the actual raw data that we're using in this legacy system, right? Reading or extracting that data is pretty low risk, but watch out for query performance to not slow down that legacy application. Usually, like I said before, these things are done in tandem with actual implementations. So you're going to want to keep it up and running. But writing that data can be tricky, right? So, that read or that pull, again, you're sort of really going to have the expertise in that domain of what that legacy application holds, where all that data is, all your data maps, if you're lucky enough to have them, right? And someone who knows what exactly we're looking for to basically grab all the data that we need. And maybe, part of that process is also realizing what we don't need, right? And sort of maintaining that data quality going forward in a way that can sort of be used effectively, which leads us to the next part, which again, that writing part can be tricky because you have to sort of replicate that business logic based on what's sort of backend processing is done in that legacy application, but not break your data model. So there's not usually a one-to-one mapping and implementation from a legacy system into a target. If that happens to be your case, congratulations, you're sort of 1 in a million. But again, it's going to need some serious consideration around domain and what exactly we're using this data for, right? Not just in the past, hey, this is how we used to do things, but looking into the future and how we would like to use this data in the future, right? So another thing to consider as we're sort of looking through and connecting to a backend DB. But sort of this process and this, like I was sort of explaining earlier, opens up a lot of possibilities on what else we can do with data, right? So sort of having the ETL tool connected to it really gives you the ability to manipulate it and think, hey, what can we use this for in the future? Do format conversions, cleansing, really maintaining stiff data quality, and also directly provide reports in a lot of ways, not just on the migration itself, but think of once you're in that target system, what do you want to know about your data? It also allows you to expose your data to other applications or systems, right? So it's not just doing a legacy to target, it's also having the ability to serve out data, in the form of an API, right? Maybe you want to expose data to business users or people who are less technical, or even, from a reporting perspective, business leaders within your organization, right? That's sort of the ideal sort of data scenario where we have information readily available to everyone in the organization on a sort of a needed basis, right? So it really is more than just an opportunity to move to a different system. It's really an opportunity for us to imagine and engineer our ideal data scenario in a way where ETL really is the backbone of that, right? And that's sort of where CloverDX, us as a company come in. We're really focused on allowing you to connect to a wide range of different sources, including legacy systems, right? Implementing business logic to transform data to that sort of required format, especially in the context of a migration to a more modern system. A lot of them have very specific migration pieces and requirements that need to be done in a certain way for it to be successful, and automate all of our data extraction in a way that allows us to, again, sort of create that ideal data scenario and really create that data backbone for our entire organization as a whole, right? That's sort of what we pride ourselves on, and sort of what we have been able to successfully do for many years for many of our clients. Now let's talk about some tricky nuances and ideas as you're sort of going through that sort of journey. The biggest ones being data quality and data mapping. So data quality is the single biggest issue in our experience in most legacy migration projects. Think early 2000s, sort of Excel spreadsheets world. This data is frequently coming directly from users, and it's typed into an application or Excel documents, something written in .NET. The people that have been running these often come and go. So to have, sort of the processes and ideas about this data changes, often without regard to data quality or data integrity. So, really a lot of the things that start that idea of moving away from these legacy applications is because you have so much garbage in them, you're going to get garbage out of them, right? So migration and sort of that migration process is your best chance to fix your data, right? The business already expects complications and issues with the data, but it's really up to us in the process of migration to get the best that we can out of it and make sure that our past mistakes in dealing with data integrity and data quality don't come back to haunt us in the near future as we're moving to a new system. Even if you have a fancy new system, if you don't have the ability to measure and sort of effectively deal with data quality at every step in that process, you're not going to really get anywhere, and it's not really going to help as much as you think it would, or as much as it could potentially, right? So the idea and the key here is really to try to fix data as early as possible, ideally in that source system, ideally in that source legacy system that you're trying to get and extract data out of, however that may be, right? The next problem is really a data mapping problem. And that's how to map entities in an old system to ones in a new one, right? There's not really, a one-to-one mapping across different systems, right? Each CRM or ERP system is incredibly different. The concepts are the same, right? So they have the same data domain. You're getting the same type of information, but they all have different ideas on how to represent everything and how to have that actually be played out in data structures, right? And how you're actually processing them, right? So something to keep in mind is really how knowledge gaps can really affect this in your planning process, right? That old system might not be very well known to anyone. So there's going to have to be quite a bit of data exploration and data sort of solidifying what these data maps look like. And at the same token, that new system may not yet be known yet, right? It might be a great idea and everyone agrees that it is, but unless you have someone with direct sort of knowledge and expertise using it, you're going to have sort of a difficult time mapping it out, right? So the idea is, how do we track mappings and make them accessible for business users in a way that makes sense, right? So that's sort of where mapping development and sort of CloverDX comes in really handy. What you're seeing here is a screenshot of a migration project that we've done for clients before, but basically this is a concept here in CloverDX where we're using our design tool to really make these sort of visual data pipelines to sort of map out and run an actual migration in a way that would make sense to business users, right? So we have these different components here, like customer, table, names. Think of like different tables that would be active in like a legacy CRM application. And we have different readers that are basically pointed to them to be able to sort of filter out unnecessary information, right? So like sort of the data quality checks that we need to do with them, sorting them out, and then actually creating rules for how these things are mapped, right, in a visual way, right? So deduplicating any erroneous data, creating rules that allow us to duplicate and validate data, and eventually write them out over here on the right side to a target account, along with an error report, right, on how each one of these different processes either, gone through successfully or failed along the way, right? So we want to basically split these mappings into multiple pieces that make them easier to build and verify, right? In a way allowing you to sort of document your code. And the cool thing about Clover is a lot of it's self-documenting, right? It's a visual pipeline that you can sort of turn over to someone on a team and explain pretty quickly that, hey, we're taking data from 3 different tables, we're splitting it apart, merging them together in a way that makes one cohesive entity in our target system that is an account. And all the different pieces that entail those account can clearly be seen, right? So that sort of helps a lot with mapping development. Nothing's one-to-one, like I said before, but this allows us to really build powerful visual automated pipelines that, again, act as sort of the backbone of that entire migration process. And really important here is the ability to validate your data and report to business, right? So along the process of this entire migration, we're sort of keeping note of what's going on, the different types of data that we have coming into the system, and any reports we're able to create, again, sort of a human readable spreadsheet report that we can then send to someone who's a business leader or user and let them know exactly what's going on throughout this whole process, right? This would be a lot harder if we were to try to like script this out or do this pretty much in any other format because it's not self-describing. We're not able to sort of create our own custom visual representations of what reports we want and how we want our business to sort of view this entire process. And this is a fairly simple example, right? This is 3 tables to 1, but think of an entire ERP application going, let's say, from on-prem to something in the cloud. You'd literally have thousands of different tables and frameworks that require really powerful automatic reporting and sort of data migration in general. So keep that in mind. This is just a simple example, but it really, really helps once you start ballooning out to a full enterprise level data migration. And once you sort of have those considerations sort of planned out and have an idea of what it might look like, it's really important to have everything tested and have a plan for go live, right? The communication between different teams is really key. So having frequent updates to your business users on what is happening, what the near future looks like, and what the end goal is incredibly important. Along with that is the ability to create detailed reports to help ensure that production data is okay, right? And this is important for both business users and our sort of data engineers or migration specialists that are sort of ferrying us through this journey, right? And also be ready to support the solution. Hypercare is super important. Be ready to sort of deal with these problems as they come up, right? In this previous pipeline I showed you, hey, we're going to have an error report. Have a plan ready for the hypercare around when these errors pop up, because they will pop up. And don't be caught sort of surprised when they do. That sort of takes us into CloverDX as a data management platform. Really what CloverDX is the ability to work seamlessly in teams to work on different data initiatives, whether it's data migrations or just trying to integrate data for BI purposes. It really is a comprehensive enterprise level data backbone to create your ideal data scenario. Along the way, we're tackling messy data, things that need cleaning up, repurposing, and construction enrichment in a way that really allows us to meet tight deadlines, right? The migration frameworks that we've been able to do for different partners, to and from different ERP systems or CRM or things like Workday are sort of, don't just think of like one single pipeline, but entire frameworks that can really meet tight deadlines when traditional approaches can't deliver on time. And we can do everything from sort of data harvesting at the source to see, exploration of what that data looks like and how we can map it to a target. We sort of help create that entire cohesive environment in a single ecosystem that is CloverDX as a data management platform. Here at Clover, we solve 100% of a problem, not just this sort of easy 90%. There's a lot of sort of ETL tools out there, but really Clover's is sort of built specifically to deal with errors and outliers and deal with sort of that tough 10%, right? It's built on a single platform to sort of flexibly build and fill in gaps in an existing technology stack. We sort of combine the capabilities of coding. So think of sort of traditional scripting, data engineering, data processing with a visual design. So it lets developers solve very hard technical problems, script things out, or sort of code yourself into and out of different situations, while empowering less technical colleagues to sort of understand and create data pipelines themselves. And thanks to its open architecture, every part of Clover can be customized, versioned, parameterized. The idea here is there's really no I can't, whether it's a data migration or any other sort of data initiative within your organization. We're sort of a very capable tool to let you get to that ideal data scenario, right? And the idea here is we're automating everything, right? All of your data workloads to include, how do we process exceptions? How do we deal with the intricacies of real life processes and schedule jobs for automatic delivery to things like data warehouses, data lakes, operational, DBs on-prem in the cloud, and really orchestrate external system and tools by having Clover sit at the center of all your different sort of data architectures, events, APIs, calls, or message queues. We can handle it all. So really quick here, just wanted to sort of cover what we do as a company. We help different organizations create their ideal sort of data backbone and deal with different data initiatives as they come up. I would say a lot of our clients start with something like a small legacy migration or a BI tool that they want to integrate with, and end up seeing all the things that Clover is useful for, and it quickly balloons into sort of, the backbone of the organization. And that's really the power of Clover. But in summary, we want to pick the best migration strategy to keep all of our stakeholders happy and productive. That includes business users and IT users, right? So have an idea of sort of what that looks like in your ideal data scenario, and have a comprehensive plan for all contingencies, including problems as they come up, while considering all your business goals and sort of maintaining a transparency in all your different processes, have documentation, have data maps, have everything so that anyone can come into this sort of process and have a good firm idea of where we are and where we're going. And that's really the idea there. So with that, I sort of talked to all the points that I wanted to talk to. And we'll move to sort of a Q&A. If anyone has any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. We'll read them out. And just a reminder that we have a new webinar sort of in a couple of days, specifically on our new release, CloverDX 5.13. It'll be at 10 a.m. In a couple of days. So be sure to check that out. We have some really cool new features coming out on this release that I think a lot of you will be excited about.
All right. Thank you, Calvin. And yeah, you can either use the chat box or you can use the Q&A function of Zoom to ask your questions. And as Calvin said, we're wrapping up our webinar series this year. So the 5.13 is kind of not a standard webinar, but more of an announcement of what's new and exciting in the latest version of Clover that actually came out today. So we're very much fresh with 5.13. So who's interested in like what the product can do, definitely recommend joining. It's this Thursday. That's our last webinar. Thanks, Linda, for the note about the microphone. Yes, we've had some issues this morning with the microphone. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. We couldn't sort it out. We have a question that I don't entirely understand, to be honest. Or more of a comment. I run a tracking app with 150 semi-trucks. What can I do with the data if I work with you guys? Maybe I will need a little bit of
context is important there. But really endless possibilities. As far as sort of, do you want business intelligence from it? Do you have live feeds of different, data coming in? How you want to use it is really probably a good place to start as far as building a solution for that. But I mean, we've worked with all types of different clients on how to get the best use out of their data. So I have no doubt that we can somehow help you get to it. But really, a good point to start is what's the goal there?
Exactly, yeah. And in the meantime, we got another question. Hi, in data mapping, will this conversion affect on DB schemas or not?
Sorry, can you
Again,
repeat that
Michael,
question?
in data mapping, will this conversion affect on DB schemas or not? Probably we might need additional context there as well.
Yeah. So from what I can extract, what I'm thinking of is like from a legacy application to a new target system. The transformation of data can have an effect in the target system on sort of the data type or what it looks like, right? So simple example would be like, we have a legacy application where someone decided that all the data inputs should be raw string and there is no data validation, versus we're moving to a new target system where we're having to use timestamps or dates, things like that. And that new data type is going to have to be converted, and all the errors in that sort of legacy system, trying to convert or transform them into a timestamp, can sort of be a process into itself and could affect that target system as well. So that's a simple sort of example, but I guess the quick answer to that would be yes. There's sort of why we build around contingency plans for more nuanced or difficult situations around legacy applications.
All right. Thanks, Calvin. If we didn't answer your question, please feel free to add a little bit of context, which might help Calvin to answer the question more directly. Yeah, let's give it one more minute if anyone else has any question. By the way, for those of you who are joining us on our series, as we're wrapping up webinars for this year, I would like to thank you for joining us multiple times. We've been running these webinars every single week this year, so it's been kind of a marathon, but thanks for kind of bearing with us and staying tuned to our content. That's we really appreciate that. Anyways, I think that's it. We're not getting any more questions in. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. And as I said, happy holidays. Enjoy the rest of the year, and hopefully we'll see less COVID and less restrictions next year. And yeah, we'll regroup on the webinars as well. We have one more question that came through. So Calvin, my question is there a manual for this tool? And I might actually jump in with an answer. We do have a trial, which is available on CloverDX.com. So if you navigate to CloverDX.com, there's a big button up there saying trial. You can get the trial, you can play with it. And we have on our what's called Learning Center, learn.cloverdx.com. Again, from your trial, you can get to it. We have 2 walkthroughs or quick start guides where you can find out sort of getting started manual. And we're working on an update. Actually, we don't have that yet, but soon we'll have an updated version of that, which will be way better than what we have now. So yeah, it's coming out. There's documentation, there's everything, but I think the most interesting part is the trial where you can experience the full functionality of the product across both the design tool that Calvin was showing, as well as the server and the orchestration tool. So I'm sharing the link to the Learning Center right now in the chat. So whoever wants to look there, please navigate it. It's right there. Simply learn.cloverdx.com. Okay, I think that's it for our questions. Again, thank you for joining us. And yeah, we'll see some of you for sure next year. Thank you. Thanks, Calvin.
Thank you all for joining. Cheers.
All right. Cheers. Bye.